You take the waistband and you fold it wrong sides together so that the right sides are showing on both sides. And then you're going to take this first edge and you're going to leave about an inch for a seam allowance once you pin it all the way around. And you're going to start right here on the seam next to the pocket. So your waistband is folded together. You're going to have the loose ends at the top. Take the loose ends at the top, and then you take the seam. The left pocket is over here, and the back is starting back here. And you're going to put that waistband with an inch to spare, so you have, because you're going to sew that next to it. You have to have a little seam allowance there. Start there and put a pin there. Then you keep going around. Remember, the separated edges are at the top, and then you just pin those 3 edges together and go all the way around. And remember, when you're pinning this waistband, the wrong sides are together, the raw edges are at the top, and you're pinning it to the outside of the skirt. So the right sides are actually together. And this is a tricky part when you get to the pockets. Remember I told you about that folded edge and you pinned it over? So when you get there, you got to make sure that the raw edges and the folded edges and the back of the skirt are all lined up together. It's the most fabric you'll have to pin together on the whole thing. So take your time going through this and make sure that that folded edge is still flat. You can see there's my folded edge pinned. And so you've got the folded edge, you've got the skirt edge, and you've got the 2 edges of the waistband. And those all have to line up exactly. And you'll do that for the next pocket as well. Okay, now we're almost to all the way around the skirt. And remember that little inch of seam allowance. You're going to take those edges. The way I do it this is I open the waistband up on both sides, because you're going to take those 2 edges and line them up so that they're together. Right sides together, meeting at the seam. That little edge, put a pin in it, and you are going to stitch down that seam. So that's what that is going to look like. Right sides together. This is the ends of the waistband. And you're stitching it where they both connect at the seam. And then your waistband will be a loop once you've stitched it. And I'm just stitching that seam right straight down from top to bottom. And then when you've stitched that, trim the seam allowance. And trim the threads. And then when you got that stitched, go ahead and put the last few pins into your waistband so that all of the waistband is pinned to the front of the skirt. And then you're going to stitch the waistband onto the skirt. And you're going to start at the seam where the waistband seam and the skirt seam match up. And go slow on this one too, because you got to make sure all of these layers, you got 3 layers in some parts and 5 layers in another. Make sure that they're all lined up together. I'll keep checking and rechecking to make sure all these layers are lined up together. Once you get to where the pocket is, this is the hard part. Make sure that all of these layers are together. You've got the skirt front, the waistband layers, and then as you're coming into that fold, Make sure that's really flat and that the fold is all caught up. This is the hard part. I'm gonna peel these layers back. And there's my pocket edge. So I've got the skirt layer, the pocket 2 layers, and the waistband 2 layers. And all of that has to get put up together. When you're going through the first one, the fabric fold is away from you so it lays down flat. But when you get to the next one, you gotta be even more careful. All right, again, I can see my pocket, the fold, everything's lined up. And come on through. Now we've gotten to the second pocket. You gotta make sure that this fold is really flat and lined up right, because this edge is gonna wanna pull back. And you gotta make sure that that stays forward and flat as you're going through this pocket edge. So I keep my fingers pressed down on it to make sure it stays flat. And then you still got more layers to get through. Make sure they're all lined up. And now your waistband is stitched to your skirt. And that's what the waistband looks like when it's attached to the skirt. Ha ha ha. Now go to the inside of the skirt, and that seam, that where you started, you're going to take a seam ripper and open up the back section of that seam, because that's where you're going to put your elastic. So you take your seam ripper and you cut through there a little bit, pull it out a little, only go up to the top edge. You don't want to open up the front. And now you got a hole to put your elastic through. The easiest way for me to do this is I take a safety pin and I stick it on the end of the elastic. And that gives me something to push through. And then you just, through the hole, and you slide the safety pin forward and then pull. And slide the safety pin forward and pull. And you keep doing that until the elastic comes out the other side. Once the elastic comes out the other side, you're going to pin these 2 sides together with the safety pin. And at this point, I'm going to put the skirt on because I've got to adjust the elastic to get the length of stretch that I want in my skirt. And also make sure that your elastic isn't looped over around inside the pocket. I've done that many times. I have to take it apart because they're twisted. So make sure that they're lined up side to side right. Okay, sure enough, I had the elastic twisted. So I gotta fix that first. Unpin and untwist. There we go. And lay them flat on top of each other. You don't need to, it wears better that way. You don't get a lump from the seam that you would do if you put right sides together, because no one's gonna see this part anyway. All right, so now I've got it so it's not twisted, and I'm thinking, okay, that's about right. So now I've got my elastic set the way I want it. So now I can take a scissors and leave some pad just in case you screw it up, and cut that like that. And now you're gonna stitch the elastic to itself. So that's how your elastic is gonna look when you stitch it. They're laying flat together. And then I'm gonna stitch on this side, and I'm gonna stitch on that side. So here we go. I'm gonna stitch and backwards. And I'm gonna stitch the other side. Forward and backwards. Now your elastic is stitched together. So now you've got that hole where you open it up, put the elastic in, you're going to stitch that hole shut. And the way I do it is I just pull one side over on top of the other and stitch straight down. Not the prettiest job I've ever done, but it's stitched. Then you put your skirt on and you get your hem length. And for mine, I usually do the hem just the way it is. I fold it up underneath, make sure that that's correct, and it is. So you take the bottom of your skirt and you fold it once, and then you fold it over again and pin it like that, and then you have a nice clean look on your hem. And once you get it all pinned, you stitch it up and it's finished.